Here we are.
A transition from making books to talking about books. What a good concept.
Yes, well, we should share some of the making books with people. We've had a lively conversation backstage here about gambling across America. And
I said making book, not naked books, Alan.
Making book.
Well, yeah.
Get your mind out of the gutter there, boy.
I can deal with both.
Well, let me, before we go astray here, let me welcome everybody to the Rare Book Cafe, the book lovers rendezvous, where the topics are priceless and the conversation is free. This is a virtual cafe available anywhere in the world, and you can join us every Saturday right here on the Rare Book Cafe. It's Saturday, October 26, 2019. There are 181 days left until the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, which is April 24th through 26th, 2020, right here in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is where I am from and where I live. And Thorne Donnelly is joining us today, and he is in South Florida. He's in Jupiter, Florida, and is the proprietor of Liberty Books. And Lindsay Thompson is not in Florida, but on some days wishes he was, and other days he's quite happy that he's not. But Lindsay is in the land of Walt Whitman. Oh, no, wait.
No, he just looks like Walt Whitman.
Lindsay is in South Carolina and is the proprietor of Henry Bemis Books in South Carolina. And if you have any questions about Henry Bemis Books, I suggest you look it up, because there's a whole backstory there that we're not going to go into right now, but there, I think, is a fascinating backstory. At any rate, Steve and Edie are away on a much-needed and well-deserved vacation.
Yay!
And so we wish them well, and we hope they are having a great time out, perhaps away from books, certainly away from the internets, and we hope that they are having a wonderful time, and we suggest that they just stay away from books for a little while. A good break is always a good thing. I want to remind everybody that we ask you to like the Rare Book Cafe and to share it to people who you know would get something out of it, who you know would appreciate it. And so we are shared on a number of channels, and we can add your channel if you would like, and all you need to do is send us an email to Rare Book Cafe, and we'll be able to take care of making that happen. But know that if you are watching on another channel besides the Rare Book Cafe page on Facebook, that we will not be able to see your comments. You can make comments, and we'll look at them later after the program, but you will not be able to see them during the program. So if you want to participate in the conversation, then I suggest to you that you join us on the Rare Book Cafe page on Facebook, and we will see your comments pop up, and we will be happy to answer them. We'll be happy to engage in a conversation. And in fact, if you really feel like you want to get into the conversation and you want to become part of the effort here at the Rare Book Cafe, we have put in a link in the comments that if you click on it, it'll bring you right into what we call the green room. And Lindsay, who is running the knobs and dials and making everything work behind the scenes, will bring you into the program. And so we would love to have you come in and join us if you would like to come in and talk about rare and collectible books and any other subject obliquely related to rare and collectible books. We're happy to have you come and talk with us. We have a full show lined up today. Lindsay is going to join us here shortly. He is already here, but he's going to regale us with some of the latest news in the rare book world that has been occurring in the last few weeks, and bring us up to date on some of the things that we might have missed. Thorne has turned a new leaf and is embracing Bibles and other biblical items, and we can't wait to hear what he has to tell us about that. And I have been looking at a specimen that I found on Papa's bookshelf. That is Ernest Hemingway. A couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to go to Cuba, and outside of Havana is Ernest Hemingway's home there, and it's been preserved by the Cuban government. And I had an opportunity to peek in all the windows, and I didn't miss the opportunity because the walls are full of books. I didn't miss the opportunity to photograph them. And so I've been spending now for a couple of years, it's kind of become an obsession, but it's fun, looking at the pictures of the books that are on the shelf, and then finding out or discovering things that I know about that are on those shelves. Anyway, I have one that I want to share with you later in the program.
Oh, fun. Great.
So so as I say, we have a whole set of things lined up, and I see no reason to not just get started with Lindsay and his report on to bring us up to date on what has been happening in the world of rare and collectible books and related subjects.
Well, Ellen, one of the things I think a lot of our viewers may not be aware of is that in addition to this show every Saturday, all through the week, we're posting material from websites all around the world. I look at about 100 websites a week dealing with rare books and collectibles and antiques and auctions, looking for material about things that relate to what we talk about on the show. And so if you are not accustomed to going to the Rare Book Cafe page on Facebook, you're missing a lot of really interesting and informative material. And in the last week, for example, if you had gone there and read through the things we have posted, you would have learned, for example, that there is a man in the world called Dirk Aubink. He is a professor of classics at Christ Church, Oxford, a MacArthur Genius Grant winner, and he's in the news again now, this time for allegedly stealing 11 ancient papyrus fragments of the Bible and selling them to the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C.
Another group of fine folks.
There's something wrong with this scenario.
The Washington Post carried this story. Aubink, who is from Nebraska and somehow ended up as a professor of classical literature at Oxford University, headed the Oxford Papyri Project for 18 years. He's kind of like Greg Priori, the curator of the rare books room at the Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh, who then discovered that because he had the only key, he could haul stuff out by the boatload and take it around the corner and sell it to John Schulman, who's his co-conspirator in a pending case in which something like $8 million worth of rare books and maps and charts were stolen. Because, as we've often wondered, who watches the watchers? It's the great question that Plato never answered. So there he was, hauling this stuff out, and he found a willing buyer in the Green family, who owned the Hobby Lobby company, and whose other great distinction in life is that they went out and bought a Supreme Court ruling that said that employers can deny health care to people because of religion. But until 2017, the Green family was busily hoovering up all the biblical ephemera they could find for this $500 million vanity museum they built in Washington, D.C. And in a decade, they became the biggest collectors of such things in the world. But in 2017, this began to catch up with them because they've had to pay a $3 million fine to settle federal charges of buying thousands of cuneiform tablets stolen from archaeological sites in Iraq. And last year, it was determined that 5 Dead Sea Scrolls fragments that they had on exhibit were found by an independent scholar to be fakes, which they had bought up.
No fine there.
So the basically, if you want to fence fake biblical stuff, you go to the Green family and Hobby Lobby, and they'll put it on in their evangelical museum in Washington, D.C., which is, among other things, noted for the fact that it has a very particular spin on how to read the Bible, and they'll just suck it right up. Professor Aubink at Oxford says ain't no such thing. He got paid for consulting to the Biblical Museum in Washington, and we shall see how that all turns out. But I always get a certain thrill out of seeing biblical book and ephemera crime, because it always seems to pit people's professed beliefs against their love of money, which is one of the things that we find in the Bible recurring as a theme, but that so many people seem in their life and practice to ignore. Another story we ran this week: a battle is brewing between Dubliners and the Swiss. We think of the Swiss as being the peaceful watchmakers and bankers of the world, but the problem now is that people in Ireland want to bring James Joyce and his wife Nora home. Joyce died in Switzerland in 1941 because the Irish Foreign Secretary sent a cable upon being told that Joyce was dying and asked if he was dying as a Christian. And when he was not able to get a satisfactory answer, he barred the transfer of Joyce's remains back to Ireland. So Joyce was buried in Ireland, in Switzerland. His wife, who died some years later, was buried with him. There is now a Joyce Foundation in Switzerland. It has become, as such things do, a bit of an industry. And now people are saying, well, let bygones be bygones. Let's bring him back to Dublin and turn him into our own tourist attraction.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone is arguing about the tickets. Me, I would say, if Ireland is serious about anything literary, then that'll be the day when they bring Oscar Wilde home. But until then, I'm a bystander in these sorts of affairs. Another story we ran that we borrowed from Books Tell You Why, which is the website of South Carolina's leading rare book dealer.
A longtime exhibitor at the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair.
And I tell you what, they have some of the best quality posts on collecting that anybody has in the world. And if you want to verify a signature in a book, you can go to their page, and they have a subsection of images of autographs. So they're really top quality people. And so anytime something pops up from them, I pay attention to it. And one of the things that we shared this week from them, because they have this curiosity that runs in directions many of us do not think of, is how to begin and fill out a collection of the works of famous economists. And, that's something I recur to from time to time on this program, is that anything can be a collection. Whatever you are interested in can be a collection. We have had collections shown to us that involved medical books in the military, how to deal with war wounds, romance novels, anything that you like as an individual, you can make a collection of, because there are people out there who have done it, and there are exemplars of that type of book available in first edition that you can make something of. I had never frankly thought of, going from Adam Smith to Alan Greenspan, but there you are. These are the things that book dealers can help you do and help you find the material that you want to look for to become a completist, if that's the way you want to go. And it actually inspired me, given that the times, as fraught as they are, has had me thinking of doing a collection of books on impeachment.
Where'd you get that idea?
Well, actually, I'm a bit of a
history
subject. In the 1970s, the first time in my lifetime, and it kind of surprises me that out of the 4 impeachments that America has experienced, 3 have occurred just in the 60-odd years I've been alive. But when President Nixon was on the block, Bantam Books, the great and much lamented paperback publisher, dusted off a book by a Harvard law professor called Raoul Berger, and it was simply called Impeachment. And, I bought it. It was like 75 cents, and it was a thick scholarly tome about the topic. But I learned an immense amount about what the process was. And back then, TV spun things, not like they do as dexterously as they do today. But there are times when it's good to know the background of the things that we're having to deal with in day-to-day life. Impeachment actually is a fascinating subject.
And there's a lot of material about it too, isn't there?
Yeah, William Rehnquist, the late Chief Justice, presided over the impeachment of President Clinton, and he wrote a book about it. A wonderful scholarly tome that is, frankly, more accessible to the average reader than Professor Berger's. There's been a book out recently that deals with impeachment in colonial times in America, from the 1600s to the beginning of the Republic. There's been a book out recently by Cass Sunstein, the great USC professor on impeachment. So, anything can be something you want to collect. You can learn from it. You can bore your friends with it, and you can line them up on your shelf and say, and this is my collection.
It's true, Lindsay. I wanted to give a shout out quick to Sharif Hafifi, our friend in Alexandria, Egypt, who points out that yes, things could be a collection, especially if it's rare or unusual. And it's if it's something that you just like. Things that,
and the beauty of it is that simply having a passion for an obscure subject can end up being a major contribution to literary history. And the example that I have given in previous shows is that virtually any respectable large university library will now have a gay and lesbian literature collection. But none of those collections ever began because the universities or the libraries thought it was important. They began because individuals collected those materials.
I always think of Jess Kahn, who joined us a while back here on the Rare Book Cafe, who won the Honey and Wax, the first Honey and Wax book collecting prize for her collection of romance novels.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
At some point, we'd love to have her come back and talk to us about some of the things that she has discovered since she was last on.
Oddly enough, she's now a member of the Grolier Club, and I was one of the people that helped sponsor her. She's really going along quite nicely.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah,
And Sharice
see, that's
says I used to collect matchboxes when I was young. I used to have 200 different boxes from different factories in different colors and designs. Cool.
and you know that's the beauty of collecting, is that without intending to, you can take your personal passion and turn it into a scholarly field. I'll give you an example. I used to collect miniature buildings, the little pot metal buildings you could buy as souvenirs
Mhm.
when you went around the world. I acquired about 60 of them over 30 or 40 years. And in the 1990s, I was in San Francisco, and the Museum of Modern Art there had a collection developed by a couple of architects, a husband and wife, and they had hundreds of them. They could recreate scenes of Paris and London and other big cities. They had so many of them. And this was just something they collected, but they ended up with thousands of them to where they built an outbuilding at their house just to display them all. And it became a collection. It became a thing because no one had ever thought to study the way that souvenir buildings are collected and carried around the world. And so that is part of the beauty of collecting anything, whether it's Sharif's matchboxes or my little buildings or books about gay and lesbian literature. You can actually create a field of study yourself simply by pursuing your interests. And that's one of the magical, wonderful things about collecting that has drawn
I
me
think
to.
in Jess Kahn's case, I think she set about doing a catalog or a comprehensive study of the of her collection and cataloging her collection so that it then becomes a useful resource for
Exactly.
people to use as a basis for study.
The last story we've run in the last week that I want to talk about is if many of you, I'm sure, have been asking yourselves, what does Steve Eisenstein have in common with J.D. Salinger, the author
I've
of
asked
Catcher in the Rye?
that. I've often asked.
I'm sure. I know Alan has mentioned this to me more than once, that he has woken up asking himself that question. Well, the American Scholar, the magazine published by Phi Beta Kappa, has an article up these days called 10 Famous Authors with Surprising Day Jobs. And it turns out that J.D. Salinger, a decade before he published Catcher in the Rye, worked as an activities director on a luxury Swedish cruise ship.
Wow.
And he later set one of his stories called Teddy on such a cruise ship. And Steve has mentioned to us many times, and I'm sorry he's not here today to fill us in about his long career as an entertainment director, first up in the Catskills and then down along the Miami Strip. And so when I saw that story, I immediately thought of him and read it and discovered that there he and J.D. Salinger, who was notoriously reclusive, would have had something fascinating in common to talk about. And so that's the kind of stuff that you learn if you go to the Rare Book Cafe Facebook page.
Yes, you do.
A fascinating material that you'd have be hard pressed to find all in one place, all collected anywhere else.
Well, that's the thing I try to do. There is so much rare book material out there, but it is so fugitive. It is spread over so many different places that I've been able over the years to create a list that I just click down every day. I have 10 or 20 sites to look at. And what we try and do is aggregate all this material for our viewers in one place so that you don't have to go and look at 100 different websites in the course of a week. to find out what's going on in the fascinating world of rare books.
You can find it right here on the Rare Book Cafe page. And on Saturdays, you can
You can look
join
at our
us. And you bring a hat, and you can join us right here on the Rare Book Cafe. You know, before the program started, we asked Thorne, who is an odd man out today, and does not have a hat on today, although there was no memo. So it's
an organic thing.
Organic, but we asked him why or why he didn't have a hat, and his reply was, and edit it, please.
I look so wonderful without one.
You do indeed.
We all agree. Thorne is just a really pretty man, even without a hat.
It's funny. That's what a lot of my old girlfriends used to say, and I knew I was getting old. I had a gal over at my house about 5 years ago looking at some pictures of me in the past, newspaper photos and stuff. She said, "You sure were pretty." I heard the were. And I said, well, I guess I got to stop hanging out with the young babes nowadays. That was the end of a long and storied career, though, from what I understand. So it was good. It was a fun ride.
So, Thorne, I know you have some things to share with us, but before you do, I want to use the opportunity here as we transition. I want to use the opportunity to put in a couple of plugs for things. One is that I want to mention the logo at the bottom that you see at the bottom of the screen here. We are powered by BeLive Studio 2. And BeLive, I don't know if you are aware of it, but if BeLive is a platform for doing exactly what we're doing. And if you out there in the world are having a reason, an opportunity, and a reason to do a live broadcast on your channel, then we highly recommend using BeLive Studio 2 as the way to do that. And our friends who created this are in I think in Haifa, Israel, and they have created a platform that now reaches around the world and brings people in all over the world together. And of course, an example of that in our case is Sharif Afifi, who is in Alexandria, Virginia, or
nice try there, Alan.
Egypt. Sorry, Alexandria, Egypt, and directs the restoration of rare books at the Bibliothèque Alexandrina, which I probably didn't say right, but the library at Alexandria, and it is a fine facility that, and he is in charge of directing the efforts of a team that restores wonderful old volumes that have been mistreated either by weather or other circumstances, and and we've seen examples of some of the things that they've been able to do. If you have the opportunity, I suggest that you check out Sharif's. Look him up on Facebook. You'll find connections to videos and so forth that are some of the things that he's done. Another example of how BeLive Studio 2 has brought people around the world together is in Ireland. Felix,
very good example.
Felix O'Neill is a book dealer and book collector in Limerick. No, not Limerick. That's my next subject, Limerick. But is a dealer
now,
in Ireland,
Yeah.
And we've visited with him on a number of occasions, and we're always looking forward to. In fact, next month we expect to be talking with Felix again to see what he's recently developed an opportunity to open a bricks and mortar shop in a special circumstance. So we can't wait to hear about that. And then there are numerous examples around the world of people that we have connected with, and all because we have this platform to be able to do that. So if you have a need to do something like that, we want to be the first to recommend Be Live Studio 2. And if you have the opportunity and you want to move forward in something like that, we are happy to entertain any questions and direct you to the right place to get the right answers. So,
Alan, I have a question. You mentioned Studio 2. Is that the second version of Studio, or is that the home version versus the pro version we use?
And what that means from a technical standpoint, I don't want to get into too far in the weeds here with that, but what that means is that they found that to do the things that they wanted to do to improve the platform, and they continue to do that. They really do that. We find changes every week. Yeah. To do that, they just needed to build a whole new platform. You can go to the old studio, the original Be Live, and still broadcast from it, in fact. But they built this new one, and it is. I think some of it is still in beta, so they're testing it. But they've made great improvements from the things that we had started with, and so we are happy to recommend it, and we also looking forward to all the new functionality that for us as people with an interest in antiquarian books is a facilitator. This is a way of allowing us to talk to book dealers and people with an interest in books all around the world, and to be able to have to share those things, share their thoughts and ideas with people of like mind and like interest. So we're always happy for the opportunity to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention was the contests that we have related to the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. We have a contest running, and we want to invite you to be part of that. It's the Limerick contest, and I got ahead of myself when I mentioned that Felix was from Limerick. He's, of course, not from Limerick. He's from County Tipperary in Ireland. But I'm sure that he enjoys a good limerick when he hears one, and we do as well. And so what we're looking for is for people who are subscribed to be clever and win tickets. You have an opportunity to win tickets at the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, and we have an example of a limerick that gives you an idea of the kinds of things we're looking for. There once was a lady from Fargo who had a young sister in Largo. And for those of you who are not familiar, Largo is a town close to St. Petersburg here in Florida. They came to the fair, found lots to like there. She's sending her books home as cargo.
And my question is killing me. Who is the author of that famous limerick?
That shall remain anonymous.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll keep that secret to the grave then.
And then there's a plaque here that is in Limerick, Ireland, and unfortunately the image is not large enough for me to be able to read to you that. So we'll just mention that limericks come from Limerick, Ireland, and there's a whole history there. But you can enter the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair limerick contest to win limericks or win tickets to the book fair. And you can find the rules for the contest on the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair, floridabookfair.blogspot.com, the blog for the Florida Antiquarian Book Fair. The rules are there, and all you got to do is go there, and then you find out how to send them in, what the rules are. And I think I've mentioned before that limericks have a ribald history, if you will, and we're looking for something that's a little tamer than that, because we have as judges a smart young woman, an old editor, and a church deacon. So
clean up your act, folks. Clean it up.
Just be forewarned and govern yourself accordingly. So Thorne, I was just fascinated to hear that you had some things to share with us about Bibles, and so I have a little different. What you have?
I have a little different take than Lindsay's, and in about 10 minutes, I'll ask him to show one of my very few pictures for the day. But a number of years ago, there was a group of us from the Rare Book School. We're actually at the Boston show, and one of our friends, a little plug for him here. I know him as James. It's James Michael Capobianco. He works at the Houghton Library at Harvard. He's a curator or something there, and he put together a show for us. He'd done it a couple of times. It's always kind of fun to go behind the scenes, which one nice thing about the Rare Book School is you usually get to go behind the scenes of the major libraries. And A, you don't wait in line, and B, you get to see the good stuff for free. So it's kind of fun. But he put on a show there for about 10 of us in the back room. And somebody suggested, well, what kind of Bible stuff do you have? And I went, oh, man, that doesn't sound interesting. And we all kind of said, well, we don't need the Gutenberg Bible. We've already seen the one at Morgan or, whatever. They're not a dime a dozen, but I don't know too many of us that haven't seen one. So we put together a show, and it started with some things I don't remember, but then it went to, they just, about the year before that, they had, what's it called? The Bay Psalm book had just sold for $14 million. It was the most expensive book sold up to that time. And he showed us our version of theirs, and or his version of the Bay Psalm book. And naturally, Harvard being Harvard said, well, ours is better. And I went, oh, that's nice. And then he showed us something that I thought was kind of interesting, a Tynesdale Bible, I believe it's called, which was a Bible printed in England. And the reason they're so rare is because, actually, I'm sorry, it's not printed in Holland, but it was the first English language Bible that was circulated around England. And the problem with that is you caught possessing one of them, they kind of offed your head and they took your Bible, because in those days the church wanted it to be filtered through their priests, and Latin was the language. So it took a while to get that out of the way. So you had one of those.
And I think that Felix undertook a project to reprint that Bible.
Yeah. There have been some facsimile copies of it. I mean, there are copies you can buy of the thing. It's just it's just, I think it's kind of interesting to get off with your head to speak it in English but then he got around to some other things. So got the Psalm book, and he got to something that kind of crossed with me. And then I'll tell you the final thing, which I think is hysterically funny. But he got something, and we have a picture of a sheet from it here. I'll talk about it in a minute. But those of us that remember the Revolutionary War, and I'm going to read you a small little quote here. It's from the English Bible in America. I did not realize this till he pointed it out to us. But the 1777, for those of you that remember our revolution started in 1776, the first English New Testament print in America was done in 1777 because it was forbidden to print Bibles in English in America during the colonial period, and their importation from England was cut off during the Revolutionary War, and blah, 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 went on. But this gentleman by the name of Robert Atkin actually, after the revolution had started, printed the first English language New Testament in America. It was certainly one of the parts of the revolution was the tax stamp and that. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. So he shows us something which is called the Eliot Bible. And that's a true leaf of it there. Not a stolen one, I add. You can buy them for $1,000, $2,000. People have broke the book up numerous times. But it was actually, the very first one was done in Massachusetts by Reverend Eliot in 1663. My sheet there is the second edition of 1680. So you can kind of put that into a time frame. The Bible I was talking about, the Tinsdale, I think was 1556 or something. But at any rate, what this is the Eliot was translated by Reverend Eliot, and it is for the Iroquois Indian tribe in the language of the Algonquin language. Oh, I'm going to take the liberty to write or to read you a little bit of the initial part of it. And the title page reads as follows: Mamanus rana tupapana tamwi up biblum God, nanaswi nukoni testament, kawank wasku testament. Ne kwashakona jase wintunamat Christ. So as you can notice, we've got a few English words in there, but Cotton Mather, who I'll segue to in a moment, mentioned that he thought that these people are actually speaking from the religious phrase here, from the Tower of Babel, because if you heard how I mutilated their language, most of their words are full of consonants and about 20 or 30 letters long.
Oh my.
But anyway, just for a quick segue back to Cotton Mather, after I'll tell you more about this Bible as we go along here. But the last thing they had for us that my friend showed us, so I said, well, you've got all these valuable things. We don't want the Gutenberg. What is the last thing that Harvard is most proud of? And I'm expecting something really unique. And he dramatically opens the screen on. It's really there. He just opened a table to us, and it was a pretty old and pretty beaten up Bible. And I don't think I would have listed it for more than a couple $100. And it turns out it is their prized possession. It is the Bible that came up, naturally Harvard, the Bible that came over on the Mayflower by someone called Cotton Mather, whose son Increase Mather you may know about, and who was making this comment about my poor Indian Bible here. It was absolutely somewhat of a silly thing, but having seen this, I researched it a little bit, and one of the opportunities I had kind of touches a bit of family to me. My great uncle was Senator Prescott Bush's roommate at Yale, the first President Bush's father and the second President Bush's grandfather. And so I have a small connection to them. And when the second president, I also do Rare Book School, I get to go to places that we mentioned. I got to go to the Library of Congress with the behind the scenes tour, and had a lovely lunch or dinner actually with the head of the special collections there. Very nice man. And they were telling a story that when the second President Bush asked, actually it wasn't the president himself, when the inauguration was coming, it was chief of staff. We all know that sometimes the chief of staff, well, I probably should get another job. This guy called up the Library of Congress, very arrogant as an incoming chief of staff, new to Washington power politics will probably be. And he told them, not asked, told apparently, at least that's how they say it, to get the oldest printed Bible in America. Well, the Library of Congress obviously works for the people. Well, all Congress does, of course. And I mentioned that the first one in English was 1777 by Mr. I believe it was Eaton. But what nobody seemed to realize is the first printed Bible in America was with our buddies, Mr. Eliot, the Iroquois Indians, Algonquin Bible.
Wow.
And you notice how I managed to destroy my simplistic attempt at reading that thing. I don't know how many people have watched the most recent elections. I know Lindsay was talking about the recent impeachments, but you are supposed to, you do your election thing or your inauguration thing, and you grab yourself big old, family Bible, if you will. And I think sorry about that. I think you raise your right hand. I don't know, confused watching myself on television. And you swear in that Bible. And Mr. Bush at the time, Mr. Bush, not the president yet, went to look at this bad boy. And I don't believe his quote would have been too possible to have on our children's channel either. So they finally found, I believe, I've been told, a Bush family Bible or something, because somebody actually opened the book and said, "Oh my God, what is this thing?" So the story has a little bit of fun to it, but I like, I was just grabbing my reference books here, and there's nothing really worth having pictures. Well, these things are all these blue books, but I have one here, is Historical Catalog of Printed Bibles in English from 1525 to 1961. And the point being is there are, it looks like close to, just by the name, 500 something pages of individual Bibles in English printed in that, what is that, roughly a 400 or 500 year time span. I know Steve was telling us a couple of days ago, telling me that his guest a couple of weeks ago on his radio show, Bucks on the Book, I believe it is, Bucks on the Bookshelf, it was a dealer collector that I believe had, it's either 600 or 1500, I think it's 600 Bibles to collect and for sale. So I mean, personally, as a book dealer, when I hear somebody says they've got a Bible coming, I cringe, because, well, a couple of things about Bibles: they're usually well made. My family business, I believe, was still one of the largest, is the largest printer of Bibles in America. It's a very small part of our business. But matter of fact, one time, I guess Hugh Hefner asked us to print Playboy. We kind of had a laugh at him, because the contract for Playboy was about 5% of the contract for God. I believe that was how my uncle put it. Uncle Huey went off to go somewhere else to get his Playboy printed. I understand they used to steal the centerfolds like crazy. Another printing story. But the Bibles are usually, if you think about it, especially in antebellum America and after the Civil War, people were getting more literate. Both here and in England, there was more wealth happening, the Industrial Revolution and such. Most homes, one of the only books they would have would be a Bible. And because of that, there were a lot of them printed. They were well made. It was, in Christian countries, the Word of God, by the church, which is a very important part of people's lives in those days. And so these things are big and they're heavy and they're well made, and they're just about worthless, most of these things. So when I hear somebody, I think I had somebody come over a couple of days ago, and it was like, oh yeah, and here it comes. It's the 20-pound special, and truly, I showed her it was a lovely Bible, and you can find them all over the place for $50 to $100, which is not something I'm
from a book dealer's point of view, not a book that's in demand. On the other hand,
there are some that are. Don't get me wrong.
Felix has made a career of seeking out and finding the most unusual ones, and it's, I think, been a large part of his collection. So,
I didn't mean to be so negative. I was just saying there's such a commodity that there's just more than there's, from a book dealer standpoint. There's not a lot of value. Although I tell a story myself. When I had my first, now my second brick and mortar store, a couple came in and wanted to sell me, again, a very badly beat up old Bible. And it was either President Garfield or President Harris. I believe it was Garfield, one of our, not Lincoln or Washington or anybody terribly of that era. It was a family Bible. And actually, I turned it down because it was going to cost a lot to restore it. They were, fourth cousins or something of the president, and had gone down in the family. And I called the museum, which was, I believe, in Ohio, and they didn't want it either. So I thought it was kind of a unique thing. In hindsight, I wish I had. I think I could have purchased for a fairly reasonable sum and put probably $500 or so into it to restore it. And I've often wondered what happened to that. That was a long time ago, and I wish I had done some kind of restoration to it, because that one, even though it was a fairly common Bible, it did have a bit of American history, and that was one of my bookseller mistakes. But so there's these things are fun, they're interesting. Lindsay had showed like I said, it's a leaf, and what I'm just going to pick up here and show is they come in these folders which have a little bit of a story on them, and then here's the actual leaf itself, which they're like I said, they're $500 to $1,000 for these. I did a little research on the Eliot Bible. Like the last couple I could find that actually went to auction were in the $150,000 to $200,000 range, but there has been one that's come up in auction in about 15 or 20 years. So if you want one, I would do my best to track one down for you, but it's gonna cost a little bit more than your run-of-the-mill Bible. The last Tynesdale Bible I saw was again that, and I believe, I don't know if there's any Gutenberg Bibles left in private hands. I can't think of one, but there might be. And I suspect that would easily blow through the $50 million range if one ever did come up for sale, just for bucket change for somebody that goes, well, I got one and you ain't got one. So beyond that, what's up, Lindsay? Haven't seen you in a while. What's going on?
I just wanted to pop in and mention that one of the interesting sidelights of the president's tariff wars, which are easy to win and short in lasting, is that he was proposing 25% tariff on everything coming from China, or as he calls it, China, that was not already under a 25% tariff. And the religious publishing industry in America rose up and said, no, you can't do that, because it has turned out that the kind of that uniquely thin paper upon which Bibles are printed, no one in America has the capacity to produce that anymore. And so the entire Bible industry has been outsourced to the godless yellow hordes, and they were able to get themselves an exemption from the tariff, because the only thing that could annoy the president's supporters more than having their soybean market destroyed for the rest of eternity would be for Bibles costing 25% more. Because God knows, here in Chester at the Walmart, in the book section, there's little else on offer.
Interesting,
indeed. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Monique, who is from Oakland, California, and I take from your message, Monique, that you are watching us from Port-au-Prince.
Oh, wow.
If that's the case, then that's how wonderful that is. But thank you for checking in with us. And anybody else who is watching us, either here live or on replay, if you just let us know where in the world you are watching from. And again, I want to suggest that if you have the opportunity to go ahead and share this program out to people you know will have an interest in rare and collectible books and related subjects.
Actually, I have one last thing that, if you will bear me, it's perhaps a little lesson if Lindsay would be so kind to put this up in a second here. I was doing some cataloging today, and I thought I would pass this on to just people that like to look at things. This is a book, and it's Motor City Muscle. It's a nice car book. It's a fairly good sized book. And what happened to me is I list on multiple websites, and I now have I had this book listed on Amazon, and apparently the ISBN number I have indicated it was a paperback, and as you can see, but it's a fairly substantial hardback book. And so I had to take it off of Amazon and figure out what's going on. And I don't know how well you can see there, so maybe it might be easier to do it this way. This is
pop it up.
Okay, he's gonna pop it. The cover here got my attention. That is I'm of the age when I grew up with motor cars. I had Corvettes. I had there we go. I had Corvettes. I never had this particular car. I had Shelbys, Cobras, all kinds of things. That car right there is a little logo on it. It says 427, the magic numbers for a Chevrolet anything. Corvettes, that happens to be an SS Malibu, standing for Super Sport. And that is on the cover of both the dust jacket and the cover of the actual book itself. I went to the copyright page and I took a look at this thing, and it says on the front cover, 1969 Camaro. Well, folks, that ain't no Camaro. And so this got my attention, and then I went to look at the back cover, which they are calling and that's so we got an SS Malibu on the front. They're saying back cover 1968 GTO. Well, folks, that ain't no goat. That is what is called a Camaro right there. So occasionally, and then the ISBN number you pull up gives a completely different edition in paperback. So that's why Amazon was mad at me. So I guess what I was going to say is one of the mottos they always give you at Rare Book School is look at the book. Because what I have in my hands, I mean, folks, it's here. It exists. It is not a figment of my imagination. You may buy it from me for $35, including free shipping. But it's not what the title page has. And just for President Trump's, in his defense, the book was printed in China. So you got to watch those little yellow words of people. They will actually print a wrong ISBN number, and they don't know the difference between an SS427 and a damn Camaro, and that is a crying shame. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I'm thinking somewhere along the way there must have been a page proof that somebody didn't pay attention to.
There may have been a fault, but I'm going to stick with my story. It's more fun.
It's all right. Okay. Well, we have blown through most of another perfectly good hour. And
yeah, great.
We've had a good time doing it, and the item that I have, I'm inclined to just save because we've only got a couple more minutes.
Yeah, that's. I think I know what you might be getting to, and I really want you to spend some time on that. That would be great. I'd love your visit down there. I've never been. What's called? What is his Hemingway's house called?
It's called Finca Vigia.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Lookout Farm, and it's at the top of a hill that and it has a beautiful view of downtown Havana from a distance about 15, 20 miles. I think it's about 15 miles from downtown Havana, and it is a place that he lived for many years. He bought it. I forget what the story was about how he acquired it, but it had belonged to, I think, a businessman in the Havana area, and he bought it in about 1938, I think. And
we got a good deal on it.
And then lived there for decades until he and Mary, his wife Mary, departed in when Castro came to power, and
went to catch him where he died.
Many years, his home was not treated well, and but fortunately the government in Cuba took the time to and with some help of Americans and urging, I think, of Americans who urged that they preserve this as an icon. As a shrine to an icon and known world
icon, yes,
in literature. So so to their credit, they have done, I think, a pretty decent job of protecting the the home and protecting the things that are part the books that are part of it. I read a story not too long ago about somebody who had visited and was offered by someone, by a Cuban citizen, was offered a book that he claimed was from Hemingway's home. And to his credit, the writer said he declined, and I think he was very wise to have declined to buy a stolen item like that. But the shelves, you can walk all the way around it, and when we do this, we'll show you pictures of the home.
Oh, great!
You can walk all the way around, and you can see in all the rooms. There's many windows, and there are shelves, bookshelves in all of the rooms.
I'd love to see that sometime. You're lucky. You're lucky.
As a book lover, I just had a great time there, and held up the group I was with because I had to visit every room. I had to go all the way around. I had to take pictures all the way around.
You're entitled.
So that I could get good high resolution images of the shelves. So when we visit that, what I've had a great time doing is you couldn't go in, but you could take pictures of what was inside. And I've had a great time over a long time, over a couple of years, of studying those and understanding what was on the shelves. And of course, a lot of it is contemporary to Hemingway at the time that he was living there. So, but that covers a couple of decades. So there's a lot of material there. And so I've had a great time just studying that and learning about the ones that I didn't know. There's some of it I'm familiar with, but then there's other ones that I was not familiar with. And to spend the time to look at that and then research the writers and research the books that he had on there has just, for me, has been fascinating. So I've returned on a number of occasions, and I hope to continue to do that. But the next time we are able to visit Papa's bookshelf, then we will do so, and we will explore one of the other authors that I've discovered there. So with that, I think we are out of time. We have actually run over a little bit, but since this is not a program that has to fit into a slot, we were able to leave at will. And so until next time, we do this for the love of books.